Nate was never sure, but he kept his mouth shut. He wasn't the most popular person in their lives, and he didn't want to make things harder for Sally. Her arms were snaked tight around his torso. He'd never get sick of that feeling. Sally on his Harley was the sexiest thing on the planet. He loved her arms around him, the way she snuggled in and made him feel like the most important man in the world. Decelerating, he cruised through the open gates and parked between Xavier's Audi and Annabelle's Mini Cooper. Sally's siblings knew how to buy him nice. The most expensive thing he owned was his Harley, which he'd saved years for, finally treating himself on his 25th birthday. He was pretty sure Annabelle woke up one morning, decided she wanted a Mini Cooper, and so just went out and bought one. Nick snickered and pulled off his helmet, glancing over his shoulder to catch Sally's smile. She had the world's best smile. It was like moonlight reflecting off a still lake, like fairy lights sparkling against an old barn wall. She fluffed her blonde locks back into place, winking at him as she placed the helmet behind her. He held her arm to steady her as she got off the bike, then leaned in to peck her glossy lips. How could he resist? She made a sound of appreciation and draped her arms over his shoulders, deepening the kiss like she always did. Desire stirred in his belly, but was quickly tempered by a loud throat clearing from the front door.
"I see you brought your bike,"
Michael called to him.
"Sally's car not good enough for you guys?"
Sally laughed and walked into his embrace. "Oh, please, Daddy. Nate's bike is way cooler than my car. It's a gorgeous, clear day. The weather's warming up. Of course we were bringing the bike." Michael let the comment slide, but the sharp look he shot Nate over Sally's shoulder said it all.
"I hate you driving my precious baby around on that thing."
Nate looked to the ground, pocketing his keys and rallying himself for a night of silent disapproval. Her family had never really warmed to him. When Sally first brought him into their precious fold, reserved was the mildest way to describe their behavior. Time had only strengthened that feeling, turning it from reserved curiosity to tight-lipped resignation. He didn't know what he'd done to offend or annoy them, but he wasn't about to let Sally go just because they didn't like him. As long as she was happy for him to stick around, then that's exactly what he'd do. With his arm protectively around his daughter, Michael Richmond led her inside, Sally chatting about her work week. She'd just come off 4 back-to-back night shifts at the hospital and always had some decent stories to tell. Her father's pride bloomed to blinding as they left Nate standing in the driveway. He wondered what that felt like, to have a parent's undivided attention. He hadn't had that feeling since he was 5 years old, and it was hard to remember.
"Hey, asshole."
A firm hand slapped his shoulder before sauntering by. Nate glared at the back of Xavier's head as Sally's little brother walked through the front door. The 23-year-old, so desperate to be suave and charming like his father, glanced over his shoulder and shot Nate a half grin. He'd never pull it off. He may have owned the Richmond looks, fine chiseled features, perfectly styled hair, and expensive clothing, but the guy had too many clown-like tendencies to ever be as elegant as Michael. He sure as hell wanted to be, though. Nate didn't understand why. He liked Xavier. Out of the Richmond family, he was the most tolerant of Nate. Yes, he called him asshole rather than using his real name, but it kind of felt like acceptance in some weird way. Nate sighed and followed Xavier into the house. Taking off his boots, he lined them up next to the shoe rack and glanced at the Grantwood painting on the wall, vibrant greens and rounded trees, which made him feel like he could step right into the countryside. It was an original. Xavier had proudly boasted that fact the day it arrived at the house for Yvonne's birthday 2 years earlier. Sally screamed. Nate jolted to attention, adrenaline coursing through him as he subconsciously reached for the weapon that wasn't even attached to his belt. Thankfully, no one saw his reaction. They were too busy laughing. Nate padded to the living room archway in time to see Sally jumping into Emmett's arms. Her eldest brother was obviously home on leave. His muscly arms wrapped around Sally as he lifted her off the floor. She giggled against him and kissed his cheek.